Have you ever wondered why HMS Hood is still 9,000 feet down at the bottom of the Denmark Strait? I do not mean how she got there. If you are watching this video, you probably already know that. But if you are unfamiliar, HMS Hood was the most powerful warship in the world for nearly 20 years. She was the pride of the Royal Navy. She was 860 feet long. She displaced over 48,000 tons fully loaded and carried 8 15-inch guns. And on the morning of May the 24th, 1941, she sank in 3 minutes. What I want to know is why nobody has ever gone back for her. To understand why nobody has come back for the Hood, you first need to understand what she actually was. The Hood was commissioned in 1920 as the largest, fastest, and most heavily armed warship afloat. She was built at the very end of the First World War to a battlecruiser design, a ship optimized for speed over armor protection. Her hull was 860 feet long. She could make 32 knots, faster than almost any battleship in any navy in the world. Her main armament was 8 15-inch guns mounted in 4 turrets. For nearly 20 years, the mighty Hood, as she was known, was the unofficial flagship of the British Empire. In 1923, she was sent on a world tour to remind everyone who ruled the seas. She steamed 740,000 miles, visited every continent except Antarctica, and was photographed in front of every major port from Sydney to San Francisco. By the late 1930s, the Royal Navy knew her armor scheme was outdated. The deck protection over her magazines was thin compared to modern battleships. A major refit was scheduled for 1939. War broke out in September of that year. The refit was cancelled. The Hood went to war with armor designed for the previous generation. This is the bit that got me. The Hood went into her final battle still carrying armor that the Royal Navy already knew was inadequate, and the man who caught up to her knew it too. On May 24, 1941, the Hood was steaming in the Denmark Strait between Iceland and Greenland in pursuit of the German battleship Bismarck. Her companion was the brand new battleship HMS Prince of Wales. The 2 British ships had been ordered to intercept Bismarck before she could break out into the Atlantic and start raiding Allied convoys. At 5:52 in the morning, the Hood opened fire at a range of about 13 miles. Within 5 minutes, the Bismarck had her ranged. At 6 o'clock in the morning, a single 15-inch shell from Bismarck's 5th salvo struck the Hood somewhere between her after funnel and her main mast. What happened next took less time to occur than it takes to describe. The shell penetrated the deck and detonated the main magazine for the after 15-inch turrets. Photographs of the moment exist. They show a column of fire rising hundreds of feet into the air, with the Hood's stern visibly disintegrating. The Hood broke in two. Her bow rose almost vertical out of the water. Her stern tilted forward. She sank in 3 minutes. Of her crew of 1,421 men, 3 survived: Bob Tilburn, a young anti-aircraft gunner; Ted Briggs, an 18-year-old signalman; and midshipman William Dundas, who climbed out of the bridge and was thrown clear by the angle. They were picked up by the destroyer, HMS Electra, 2.5 hours later. It is the largest single-ship loss of life in Royal Navy history. So the question is, where did she go down, and why has nobody brought her up? The answer is more complicated than you might think. It comes down to the depth, the state of the wreck, and a piece of British law that did not even exist when she sank. The Hood was found in 2001, 60 years after she sank. The man who found her was David Mearns, a marine archaeologist working with the British government and the HMS Hood Association, a society made up of survivors' families and Royal Navy veterans. The expedition used side-scan sonar across an area of the Denmark Strait, roughly 100 miles southwest of Iceland. The wreck was located at a depth of approximately 9,200 feet. That is nearly 3 kilometers straight down, in some of the coldest, roughest water on Earth. Now here is where it gets interesting. When Mearns sent his cameras down, what they found was not a ship, it was a debris field. The Hood's stern, which had broken away in the explosion, was lying 2.5 miles away from the main wreck. The bow section was crushed and shattered. Sections of the hull plating were spread across the seabed. The conning tower had ripped clean off and rolled some distance from the rest. The magazine explosion had effectively turned the ship inside out, and the 4-kilometer fall to the bottom had finished what the Bismarck started. There was no intact hull, there was no preserved interior, there was nothing structurally to recover, even if anyone had wanted to. The Hood, in any meaningful sense, had stopped being a ship at 6 o'clock in the morning on May 24, 1941. What was 9,000 feet down was the wreckage of a wreckage. And then there is the law. The Hood is a designated war grave under the Protection of Military Remains Act of 1986. That law was passed 45 years after the Hood sank, and one of its first applications was to her wreck site. Under the Act, the wreck and a defined area around it are sealed. Diving operations require a license. Recovery of human remains is forbidden. Recovery of artifacts is permitted only with the explicit consent of the survivors' families and the Ministry of Defense. In 2012, after years of negotiation, that permission was granted for one item only: the bell. The Hood's bell had broken loose from her bridge structure during the sinking and was lying in the debris field. In 2015, an expedition funded by the late billionaire Paul Allen recovered it. The bell was brought to the surface, restored, and presented to the National Museum of the Royal Navy in Portsmouth, where it is on permanent display. It rings once a year on the anniversary of her sinking, in memory of the 1,418 men who did not come back. The Royal Navy has made clear that the bell is the only thing that is ever coming up. Everything else stays, so HMS Hood is still 9,000 feet down because the Bismarck split her in two before she even hit the water, because what is left at the bottom of the Denmark Strait is not a ship but a debris field spread across 2.5 miles of sea floor, and because she is a war grave protected by an Act of Parliament that did not exist when she sank but covers her now. She was the most powerful warship in the world for 20 years. She lasted 3 minutes against the ship she was sent to destroy. Of the 1,421 men aboard, 3 survived. The bell came up. Nothing else ever will. Now, if you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, please let me know in the comments and I will make more of these for more ships. Be sure to subscribe so you do not miss those, and I will see you next time.